Welcome to the first event in our series of interfaith conversations here at LA County Library. This series is titled Community Care, Libraries and Faith Organizations in Conversation. I am Isabel Briggs. I am the Arts and Culture Program Coordinator for LA County Library, and I will be your host tonight. I'm going to share a little bit about sort of the purpose of these events first, just to give everyone an idea of what the spirit of tonight is about and what we're trying to explore in this event and in the next 3 events that will be happening in this series. So we were inspired for these roundtables by the idea that both libraries and faith organizations, faith communities, faith actors provide community care and community service. And while the details of why or how our respective organizations provide that service might differ slightly, we want to explore in this conversation and in the subsequent conversations a middle ground where lots of different types of community groups can meet in solidarity around that shared purpose. So we're really curious to see through these conversations what similarities come about between our service models, as well as what differences might emerge. And a question that is sort of guiding us as we develop these programs was what opportunities might arise for greater collaboration, greater impact in the lives of the people we care about when we understand our community organizations and our faith organizations as more harmonious than divergent. So that's where we're at tonight. That's what we're going to be exploring throughout the next hour and a half or so of this event. Before we go further, though, I do want to share our land acknowledgement for the LA County. So, and it's up here on the screen, and you can follow along. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva Tataviam. I hope I got that. Thank you, Roy. Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Kizh Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. Next up, I'm so excited to introduce our very fabulous panelists for this evening. As I mentioned, I'm Isabel Briggs. I work for LA County Library. We also have with us tonight Reverend Jana Milhon-Martin. Will you wave, Jana? That's her. The Reverend Jana Milhon-Martin is an Episcopal priest and CPE diplomat supervisor. She currently serves as the director for the Center of Lay Chaplaincy in the Los Angeles Episcopal Diocese, and previously served as a healthcare chaplain in a variety of settings. In another life, she was a social worker for an AIDS hospice and worked with homeless youth on the streets of Los Angeles. She has traveled extensively in Central and South America and spent time in Kolkata, India, working in Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying. Welcome, Jana. Next up, we have Elder Scott Tanner. Scott is here as well. Scott Tanner currently represents the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in communication, public affairs, for the area encompassing the southwestern part of Los Angeles County and the San Fernando Valley. Previously, he served as a bishop of a congregation and as one of the leaders of stake, which is equivalent to a small diocese in the church. He is the past president of Food Pantry LAX, on whose board he still sits, and was on the board of the Los Angeles County Emergency Food and Storage Program. Previous to those, he was the majority owner of a partnership serving the investment side of life insurance companies. Welcome, Scott Tanner. Next up, we have Nirinjan Singh Khalsa. Nirinjan has served as a commissioner on the City of Los Angeles Human Relations Commission for more than 15 years and was president of the commission for more than 6 years. He is the executive director of the California Sikh Council and a cultural intelligence educator and advisor to the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles and Orange County Sheriff's Departments, and many other public and private organizations. Welcome, Nirinjan.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Roy Twobears Delarosa is here with us. Roy is the spiritual advisor and the keeper of the Eagle staff for the Native American Veterans Association. He is a Yaqui Apache and is recognized by the Native American Orthodox Church of America. He is a United States Marine Corps veteran and has been a member of NAVA for over 19 years. In 2001 was the acting vice president. He is a public speaker and the founder of Indian Talk in California, lecturing at high schools and universities on Native culture and his life experience as an urban Indian. Welcome, Roy.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. All right. So let's get into the topic of tonight's program. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the first in a series of 4 events that we'll be hosting, and each of these is sort of exploring a different side of, or different sort of angle on community service. And tonight's focus is really the broadest and most philosophical, I guess, of our topics. And tonight we're going to explore why we do community service. So what that means is, well, we're going to find out. But we're looking to sort of explore what motivates the commitments of our faiths and our institutions in working towards collective well-being in our communities. So what are the beliefs or the mission or the beliefs that like inform our mission to deliver care and service to the public? And I thought that I would sort of kick this conversation off with a very broad question, which is, I want to ask all of you if you to sort of share a little bit about, in your faith or your tradition or your work, what is the reason for caring about other people? Like, why are we supposed to care about others? And I don't know who would like to go first. So, I don't
mind.
Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. Of course, broad, yes, but very interesting because it made me think. And service and community, of course, is ancient. And I think we find it because anytime you see anthropologists at a dig, archaeologists at a dig, searching for our vast history on this planet Earth, it is very interesting to me that sometimes they come across ancient relics, remains of our ancestors. And what always puzzles me is they have a question always that they keep close. And when they observe certain manners that a burial is done, or the possessions that one who is buried still has in their possession. And their question is always, well, is this ritualistic? Was this ritualistic? Is it religion? Was this a community? Was this a practice among these people? Were they a village? Were they a family? And that's why I was compelled to speak on the subject, because I believe that service and community are the same thing as ritual and religion. And I believe it because I've experienced it. I have this connection with my ancient relatives through my elders who've handed down information to me this information of caring for one another, respecting the Creator and the gifts that He has given us on this earth, and above all, respecting our relations, which are all human beings on this planet. All human beings are our relatives. All that the Creator created, the creatures of the earth, are also our relations. We all share the same spirit. So I feel this community and service go together with religion, and above all, creates those values of hope and faith that all cultures share. And I find that very interesting. I had the ability and the experience in NAVA, the Native American Veterans Association, to be a young person at the time when the Native American Veterans Association was founded by elders. And I learned their way, which at sometimes was very frustrating to me because there was no Robert's rules. It was about elders speak on topics that are necessary to talk about, and we will come back later and speak about it again. And we will be patient until the Creator speaks to us and shows us the way. So it made me learn the definition of patience. I had to be patient in understanding that this message was coming to me in an ancient way, in an ancient teaching, to be patient and to be prayerful. So I found myself compelled to serve community, to be of service, because of these teachings that I was receiving from these elders, which is wherever there is a need, we must be there and provide the gifts necessary for those people, whether it's shelter, whether it was food, and of course, in a modern society, employment. But what I was very convinced about with this topic is that it encompasses everything we are. We cannot form community without service. We cannot have community without extending our hands. And one of the basic fundamental things among the Native people is sharing. I know that when the Westerners came here, the colonists, they didn't understand one thing about the Native people, which was they never looked at anything as being a personal possession, but something to be shared. And I think we as American people today have to take that teaching, because that teaching is an ancient teaching. We're all from different tribes from all over the world. It is an ancient teaching. We share. No one possesses anything. It is in my hand only for this moment. And if you have need of it, now it is yours. And that's why, as a young man and a young boy being educated in Los Angeles, and I always share with everyone that no, I was not raised on the reservation. I am one generation removed from the reservation because of the courage of my grandmother. She experienced the free market. And when she was in the reserve with her family, her husband gone, she said, there's a better way now. This world has changed. And she left. She packed up her children in New Mexico in the Isleta reservation. My father was among her children, and she walked to California, always knowing that whatever was needed, it would be provided by community, by being a friend to humanity, being a friend to all the people, and seeing no one as a stranger, but as a relative. So this was very important to me when I saw what this topic was, because the more I looked into it and the more I thought about it, I thought, this encompasses everything that we learn in the tribe, that we learn in the village. And when you go back to the colonists that came here, I feel sometimes a little indifferent of how it's documented, because the 125 passengers that came here first from the West, they were sickly, they were in need, and it was the wisdom of the elders of the tribes that observed them and said, let them be. There are relatives. They're our relations. We will observe them and watch them. We will not care for them, but we will watch them and observe them. And this shows what great intelligence these tribal people had, the Abenaki of the Algonquin nation. And before you know it, the interest was there because that is universal. The technology was very interesting that the Westerners brought. Sadly, half of them would be gone in a year. And the tribes would ally themselves with these, made them part of their community. So yes, so I think it's a natural thing, a natural thing.
I
Thank
like
you.
that. Thank you. Your point about sharing is very, I have a lot of, I'm gonna come back to that. And the rest of you, Jana, like, would you speak as well on what is the reason that we are called to care about each other in your background and in your faith?
Well, I was struck by what you said, Roy, because, you know, as a Protestant Christian, my tradition wants to point to scripture, right? We want to point to some external authority, but really, why do I point to that external authority except for the fact that my parents, right, my ancestors instilled the tradition and the practice that I've adopted. So I'm so struck by sort of I mean, of course, it doesn't account for conversion experiences, setting those aside. But in my own experience, right, I was raised in this tradition, handed this tradition. And so my impulse is to point to the life and witness of Jesus. But of course, I do that because that was handed to me. And so the mandate is clear in our sacred scripture that the mandate to love others as we love ourselves, which is reflexive, right? That there's a mandate to both love self and other. And it's rigorous. In the Christian story, it's the metric is that we love others the way God has loved us. So it's a big demand. And if you take at face value, the Christian story that there was a sacrifice made on behalf of humanity, that this is a great, I mean, it's an undoable thing. So there's lots of course, lots of stories in the New Testament, but I'm struck by the impossibility of it all. Like the Christian mandate is to sell half of everything you own and give it to the poor. It's an impossibility, but I think what is demanded of us is to wrestle with that impossibility, that we must continually, sacrificially, in a way that demands something of me, take care of others. And I think the universal wisdom in that is that I am not okay until my neighbors are okay. That it's really, I must love others as I love myself, because my own well-being, my own liberation is bound up in everyone around me, because there is no other. We are all interconnected. We are all in a web of connection. So I'm so happy to have that insight, Roy, right? That and to sort of live with that truth that, you know, I have this collar on and I want to point to a book, but really, right, it's about who handed me that book in this tradition. So thank you for that tonight.
Yes. And may I say one thing that you may find shocking? And thank you very much, Jana.
Yeah, Jana.
Yeah. For saying what you did. But I wanted you to know something very interesting. Why Christianity coming here was so important. In all the native languages, and I've been around and visited many tribes, many nations, there's no word for love in the indigenous languages. In the Yaqui language of my people and in the Apache language of my people, there is no word for love. So I'm so happy that the cross came here, because after it came here in its infinite wisdom and beauty, the message was clear that the Creator's love for us, we must express that love, the same love to one another. So I accepted Christianity almost immediately, because as a child, because I could understand it. But thank you.
Oh, sure. Of course, Roy.
Scott or Nirinjan, I would love to also hear what is your background's motivation again for this love, the love of other people, the care for other people.
Yeah. If I may, I guess Nirinjan will have the opportunity to approach this from a non-Christian perspective. But members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are followers of Jesus Christ. And as we look at Christian scripture, we see he really did two things. One was he taught people. And the second one, as Paul says, he went about doing good. He healed both spiritual and physical wounds, lifted people. And he asked his followers to follow in the same path as him. And so we teach our members to do that, to strive to do that. And of course, we fall short, all of us do, on a regular basis. But there is a divine impulse in us to want to do that, to want to lift and bless those around us. Particularly as we come closer to God, we discover that we want to be closer to those around us. And the marvelous thing about this is that in our efforts to lift others, we're lifting ourselves. God knows how to make us better people. And a part of that, and I loved what Jana said, about connections and giving. And I would add when she said, give half of what you have away. It's Jesus Christ talked about throwing your bread on the water, and it comes back multiplied. And I see that happening in people who go to serve and to lift and to bless others. And somewhere along the way, they discover that they've been benefited more than they benefited others. So we look at it and we think of the sacrifice we make to serve, and yet it comes back to us. I ran this food pantry for a while, and we had volunteers. And they came, they spent their time, and some of them their means and other things working there. And they, we asked the community to be involved in that activity. I think it was very meaningful for the community that, we fed people, of course, and that was important. And that's what we wanted to do. But it had an impact in other ways. Well, let me tell you a story relating to that really struck me. I got a phone call to go to the local farmers market to pick up some produce. Somebody was donating some produce. So I went, and the lady that ran it showed it to me, and it was I'm going to say $100 worth of fresh produce, which is valuable in a food pantry. And she said, I'd like to introduce you to the donor of that. I said, great. I saw a woman walk over with her son. I went up to her. I said, thank you so much for donating to the food pantry. She said, well, I didn't donate. And I'm a little confused then. She looked down at her son. He was about 6 years old. She said, he donated. I said, how did that happen? She said, he had a birthday party. Instead of presents, he asked his friends to bring money. And then when he, no, I'm sorry, I got that confused with another story. He had a lemonade stand. So he made $100. His mother says to him, so what are you going to do with that? He says, I want to buy food for people that need food. So they went to the farmer's market, and they bought it, and they donated it to this food pantry I'm involved with, and which got me to thinking, how did he know about this? What impulse caused him to do that? what influence would that have on his life, starting at that age, thinking of the needs of other people? Now, when I was 6 years old, if I had $100, I can assure you, I would have spent it very differently. Okay. And frankly, I think I went through a fair amount of small amounts that might have added up to that. And I did spend it very differently. But see, when we have community service, it begins to change the flavor and the nature of a community, whether it's, in a native people community or modern society. And one of the things we're losing a little bit is that people are more anxious to take care of their own needs than those of others. But members of my church believe that God inspires us to want to love and help and lift others because he wants them lifted, but he also knows it's terrific exercise for us spiritually. That as we do that, we become more decent human beings. And as we become more decent human beings, the society improves. If you're concerned about the welfare of your neighbor and serving them, that's a terrific basis for building a happy, functional society. So we're very concerned about service as an institution and on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. And and I think it's time for Nirinjan to say something. And I want to say before he does, I know that Sikhs are very interested in service too. I had a wonderful meal in India one time at one of their temples where they were serving everybody that wanted a meal, and they didn't ask if I was poor. They just said, come and eat. So Nirinjan.
Thanks for the introduction and lead in. In Sikhism, and Sikhs are the world's 5th largest religion, I believe. It comes down from Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, or Hindus, then Buddhists, then Sikhs, and Jews, and yada, yada. Anyway, 2 of the basic core values of Sikhism and Sikhs is Simran and Seva. Now, Simran means constantly meditating on God. Everything you do in your life should be done through the God filter. You know what I mean? That you consider the ramifications of what you do. You consider, is this helping or hurting people? And the second is Seva. And Seva is selfless servants. The Jews call it a mitzvah because it's a good act done without any expectation of return. But in Sikhism and in a lot of the other non-Abrahamic faiths and religions, we all make mistakes. Sometimes we got a little greedy. Sometimes we're angry with someone when we shouldn't have. Sometimes we incidentally, accidentally, or even intentionally harm someone. And the reality is that what do you do with that? How do you pay the price of that unless you did something so bad you're going to prison? The simple reality is you work off your own mistakes by serving each other, by serving others, by lifting up those who are hungry, lifting up those who are ill. These core values, it's through seva, it's through service to others that you cross borders, you cross limit lines, you bring peace by serving other people. When you go help someone, they're in dire needs, and you pick them up and help them, they're not going to look at you and say, well, you're a Sikh, I don't want this. They're going to say thank you. And they're going to have a different understanding of who you are and what you represent, because good acts are understood all over the world in any different language. So it's also important to mention, besides serving other people, that we serve our planet too.
Mm.
You know, we can't abuse our Mother Earth and our Mother Nature and expect to have a good result from it.
Mm.
So, I mean, when you talk about seva can simply be stopping a pollution, stopping anything that harms Mother Earth too. You know, this is something our native elders can teach us, is how to live in harmony. And it's always something that's I've been very interested in, because they've understood for thousands of years, if you don't respect the planet, you're not going to have a planet to live on. But I think there's, you know, basically Sikhs, a lot of the way they materialize their service is what we talked about at the meeting we're at, Jana. Sikhs, we feed people. It's a basic thing that Scott was talking about. Any Sikh temple, if you're hungry, go there and they'll serve you a meal if there's someone there. Some of the ones that are small that people aren't there all the time may not. Our holiest shrine in India is the Golden Temple. And at that free kitchen, we feed over 100,000 people per day for free that come to the temple. And Sikhism was founded by 10 Sikh gurus. The third guru, Guru Amar Das, and bear in mind, India has a tremendous caste system at this time, still does to a certain extent. And people that were of lower caste, those who thought they were superior to them, didn't even want to be cast in their shadow. They did, you know, it was a deep fanaticism of discrimination. Well, Guru Amar Das was very important in India, and he used to have other princes and heads of state come visit him. And he said, if you want to come visit me, first you sit in a free kitchen and eat. And you could be sitting next to a leper, or you could be sitting next to someone of the lowest caste in India. And the whole point is, if you want to communicate with me, leave your ego at the door, because otherwise we don't have much to talk about. Anyway, service to Sikhs is core, and it manifests in a lot of different ways. And I think I will, let's see, I'll cut it off there. I know we got more questions, so.
So something that came up for me listening to all of you speak about this, and I was thinking about this earlier too when I was preparing for this conversation and thinking about community services, that like it sounds like across the diversity of the faiths that are represented here and others that aren't here, like there is some unity that around caring and doing good deeds is part of, and love, like to use love as sort of a catch-all, like that is a core part of how we are good people and why we're on this planet and what we're here to do and how we sort of come closer to something bigger than ourselves. And what I'm thinking about is like you can't do that without other people around you, and like the importance of community, I think. So which was sort of like my next question a little bit, which was, or comment, question, whatever, was like this, you can't fulfill these missions in isolation. Like you have to be with other people, you have to be in a community to enact these good deeds, to enact this service to others. And that puts such an emphasis on collectivism and togetherness in a way that was really refreshing to me. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak on that. I was just like, this makes I guess what I'm trying to say is like being in community is the way that we achieve service, like is how we do service and how we get closer to that thing. We can't do it alone. We have to have other people around us to help.
One thought that keeps
service creates community. I mean, if you're not serving and reaching, and sorry, John, I'm not going to be long.
That's
you know, if you don't reach out and help each other and serve each other, and by the way, again, I'll reiterate, serving other people is the way you wash your own, you know, transgressions, let's say, out of the picture. And if you don't have opportunities and other people. If everybody was perfect, I mean, we'd be in trouble. Sikhs would be in trouble. There'd be nobody that was hungry. There'd be nobody that was ill. There'd be nobody. So what are we going to do? Sit around? I mean, I guess we can meditate all day, but the reality is service itself is what brings us into the planet. You know, if you spend all day just meditating on God, you'd be really spaced out. But your life, what are you doing with it? You're sitting in a cave somewhere meditating. So the simple reality is without those around us, we would not be able to express ourselves as spiritual beings and be able to serve them. So their need is important, is just as important as our desire to serve.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue, because I think the thought that is rising for me is maybe partly because I'm speaking inside the Christian tradition, and that service can come from this place of condescension. And I think it's important to name that if I have the resources to give, that means I'm in the position of power, right? And I'm identifying you as the person who needs something. And while sometimes that's incredibly necessary, right? As I'm a person who has worked as a chaplain, and that's obvious in a trauma unit. There's somebody in need. There's an identified patient there. But in other contexts, I think it's beholden to those of us who want to serve to recognize that the people with whom we are in relationship with, and Nirinjan, you've like identified this, there's a synergistic need, right? We need to serve, and there are people with needs, but to frame that service from a strength model, meaning the people whom we serve and the places we serve have a wisdom about what they need and how, and the resources they need, and the resiliency they need to manage the crises that come across their lives. And so I think in my own tradition, I just want to speak that Christianity has long not been a perfect actor in service, that there's this tendency towards paternalism and condescension. And so I think this deep desire in humanity to serve can go awry when it doesn't see the people we serve as equals and as capable of identifying their own needs and their own way out.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's even remotely clear.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other definition of serving. If your service is transactional, you know, I'm not, I mean, it's good. Anytime you help anybody that needs it, it's good.
Yeah.
But how does it really represent? You know, it's so.
That's very.
It strikes me that that kind of service can occasionally be just one-sided. I have a need to validate or justify myself instead of truly trying to lift and help someone else. And that does happen too, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really interesting to me. I'll chime in as a library worker too, because I find a lot of resonance in this conversation, thinking about, I come from an institution that also, you know, serves. We do not have like a spiritual text that guides us towards that, but I think that this is really relevant for me and for, I'm sure, many other people in, you know, even secular service organizations, about that, like the need to make sure it is not transactional and it is coming from a place of equality and like mutual respect and understanding, and thinking too about how, you know, I don't get to do my job if I don't have people who like I want to work with. And I just keep coming back to that importance of like, we can't exist in vacuums and we can't exist alone, because the way that we be better people, as you know, as Nirinjan said, is like, and I think as we all agree, like, is to to show up and to be there for other people, because then that's how they will then show up for us as well. Which makes me think about like the question of altruism here, of like, is there a good deed that is unselfish? Can we serve other
There's
people?
lots of them.
Is it, I don't know.
I mean, it's easy. I mean, there are so many good deeds are selfless. You just leave your ego out of it. You know, you don't do it so you can stand up and say, I did this. Look at me, I'm wonderful. You do it because you know there's a need and you fill it, and it gives you a good feeling about yourself. It gives you an identity that is positive. I mean, that is in the flow of the light. You know, to go back to Star Wars, it's the opposite of the dark side. You know, it's you're there just to help for the sake of helping and no other reason.
So I don't think selfishness is about, it needs to be absent me, right? I'm always going to be present in the exchange. There's no way for me to remove the dynamics of my humanity, of what needs in me arise in a given moment. But if I can turn down the volume of that and not have it lead, that be the leading voice, but rather I can lead, the person's need is the lead. So I don't think altruism is absent my humanity. It's, am I singularly driven by my own needs? It's a complex mix of the two.
Yes.
Go ahead, Roy. Go ahead.
I truly believe that, because to serve others, you cannot be a person who is seeking profit. Service comes through into you from the Creator. You're blessed with it, and you do something for others, caring for the young, caring for women, caring for the weak, caring for the sickly and the elderly, out of humility. And as you do this and more of it, and you teach the young, they too become aware of what it is to be humble in the eyes of something greater than yourself. And the greatest power of all of I've seen in this nation, particularly in time of emergency, and it's sad because in time of emergency, we see it sprouting up everywhere, because it's within us to do everything, to do it individually, to do it with family, to do it with community, an act of goodness and kindness, and reaching out when there's chaos. And I feel that service comes from God himself, you know, that call for us to be good human beings, you know. So thank you. I really appreciate what you've all said. I've been taking notes. Thank you. You know, but you know, there's no currency, you know, you cannot validate service with currency, right? That's how I've always felt about it. I've told my children that currency does not validate service. That doesn't come from humility, not at all.
And that's another key point of service for us religious and spiritual beings, is it brings us closer to God. It keeps God in the forefront, and it reminds us every day that we are grateful for what we've been given, grateful to the extent that we want to share that with others.
Could I make a comment? It's a little bit of a tangent there. Let me just start by saying I want to talk about empty cupboards. If you want to feed someone, it's very hard to do that with an empty cupboard. And so in our church, we focus on self-reliance. We start with an individual and we encourage and help them to become emotionally and spiritually and financially, or what, I'm not quite sure how to phrase that last part, reasonably self-reliant. If they are, then they can minister to the needs of their family, which is the fundamental type of service. If the family is self-reliant, that is, they have enough to eat, they have a place to stay, they're reasonably functional emotionally and spiritually, then they're in a position to reach out and lift and help others. And if you have a community of people like that, then they can lift and bless those around them. There are some prerequisites to being most helpful in service. And so you have to look at yourself when you start and pull the pieces together, because people who are emotionally fragile or broken are going to have a real difficult time lifting and helping other people who have great emotional needs. And people who are spiritually broken are likewise going to struggle in lifting other people spiritually. And of course, if you have no food in your cupboard and no means, your great desire to serve is going to be frustrated by the fact that you don't have the ability to serve. So one of the things we try and do with people is to get them self-reliant so that they can be in a position of being serviceable to the community. And that seems very separate from the concept of loving and serving, but in fact, if you can fix broken people, they are more serviceable. And I think, and so we focus a lot on that. Do you have a job? Are you okay emotionally and spiritually? Can we help you? So that the people who are served eventually have the ability to turn around and serve others. And you have to address some of those issues. Some of them which very mundane things like, do you have a roof over your head? Do you have enough money to pay for groceries? Or another way to do that, how can we help you get there? So that in fact, you can be a giver instead of a receiver at some point in time. It's an important foundation for service.
That reminds me of something that I want to share, and that is, in this country today, having possessions, property, it's nothing new. It's been with humanity forever. But among the native people, we have a ceremony called the giveaway. And as your child, you're observing the giveaway of the elders. You gather, the families gather in the spring, they gather in the fall to make sure everybody gets through the winter. And you'll have certain families whose elders are prepared to meet their ancestors, and they decide to have their giveaway. And it's that time the families and these people step forward and they start to give away their possessions to people who could use it. A tool, a blanket, household goods, things are given in the giveaway because they will be useful and move forward. Nothing that comes to it as a gift belongs to you. The gift is on a journey. And the fact that that gift came to you was only part of the journey, and it has to continue to go on. And that's a very spiritual event that I observed as a child. And it was very powerful to see people who were not the wealthiest people, but were prepared to give their all, to others because they knew it was necessary. And at that time, it fulfilled a necessity. Yes.
Diane, I wanted to Diane Askren is in the comments, and she's a person who's trained as a chaplain, but she has made the observation that service isn't always about giving food or doing, and it puts in mind the difference between visible labor and invisible labor, which often women are associated with the work of caring in ways that are invisible. And so the idea of listening and being present and simply being with people is an act of service. And for always and forever, this has been associated with women's work and rendered as, well, it's invisible. It's not as seen. And I wanted to make sure we gave voice to that that just being present with people in small ways is an act of service. So which is available to anybody to do, right? And is mighty work. If you can sit with someone non-anxiously in the middle of their distress, that's tremendously hard work. And it takes a very, to borrow from you, Scott, it takes a depth of spiritual resources to be able to sit non-anxiously in the midst of someone else's distress. So I wanted to give thanks, Diane, for reminding us all of that, but also to give a shout out to the invisible kinds of services that people do all the time.
You know, moms are mothers are one of those services that is so vital, so important, and frequently underappreciated. My wife, I have 5 children. My wife sacrificed a great many things to raise those children. You know, a career that might have led to some acclaim, and you know, the mundane things that life consists of, and doing it cheerfully and valiantly. That's certainly one of those underappreciated things that came to my mind, Jana, as you mentioned that.
Among the native people, the woman is very powerful. She brings life into the world. She nurtures life. She nurtures her children, and they learn from her silent actions through observation. She is the first symbol of leadership and a place where you must humble yourself and give respect to that power that she possesses. So the woman is very powerful, and it's among the native men, among many native tribes. When you marry the woman, the man goes to her family. That woman is so powerful, she brings a man into her family to strengthen her family. He comes in to her family, and then she brings forth children to make the family even greater and stronger. It's a very, very powerful gender, the woman. I was very surprised and shocked that still today there are indigenous people that are in, I think it was in the islands in the Pacific, that in New Guinea, just barely making contact with modern humanity. And I'll never forget, this anthropologist asked this New Guinea man, that a tribal leader, you know, after they were able to converse in a way, he says to the tribal leader, "Where did you come from?" You know, his interest was, where in the expanse of this island, where were you? And he was puzzled when that anthropologist from France asked him that. And you know what his answer was? "I came from my mother's womb." And then he looked at the anthropologist like, "Are you an idiot?" And then it was translated to the French anthropologist, and he says, "Is that what he said?" You go, and and the tribal man repeated it again. "I come from my mother's womb. I'm a man." So you see, the woman is very powerful, but I'm afraid in modern society, across this nation, across this planet, it has been minimized. The woman is powerful. My wife is powerful.
I only laugh because you both have mentioned the power of mothering, and I have 3 sons. It doesn't feel that way. Just gonna say right now.
You know what? I think that is valid response.
This is true. Well,
Yeah,
it just makes me think.
Reminds me, I had a conversation with a deaf woman. Her husband was interpreting, and he said, "Yeah, we've got 3 sons, 17, 15, and 13. And I said to the husband, I said, "That must be a handful." And at that moment, I discovered that the woman could speak, because as able as she would, she told me in no uncertain terms how difficult it was to have 3 teenage boys.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it was the way you and I speak English, but she got it. It's so hard to have these boys, you know. And
among native people, you know, of course, the man takes credit. But I will tell you this, you know, I have a friend, he has 12 daughters, and his name is Many Horses. I'd known him for a long, long time, and I thought that was his name, Many Horses. But he was given that name because he had so many daughters. The daughters brought many horses.
Mm.
And the value of his daughters brought wealth, right? And that's why his tribe, the Sioux people, named him Many Horses, because he was wealthy beyond others.
Mm.
Because why? Women, his daughters.
Well, I think what this is making, like, this is what this is all making me think about, is just how important it is that that we have like support services for people that are encompass all parts of their life and all types of people, and how interconnected we all are. Back to like the Scott's point and Jana's point about serving people, being in a position of being able to like serve and being able to be just available to listen or to mother or to parent or to feed people requires that you have those resources, like the ability within yourself to be present. And how, I don't know, I just think about the chain of it all, you know, like it's like or it's not a chain, it's like a web more, and that strong communities and strong societies have support services that are interconnected, and so that if one chain breaks, there are all these other places where you can be held and supported. And if once you are in a place that you can help others, then you get them into that space. And I know you all know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Just the way that you can't, people, again, like we are not all existing in isolation, and we all need to be responsive to ourselves and to others. And I think my final question would be, because I know we're approaching the end of our time, is just how do we strengthen that web, and how do we create, like how do we build a stronger sense of collectivism and stronger services and stronger support networks for people? How do we encourage that sense of community? If community is spiritual, like if community is service, how do we encourage that stronger sense of interconnectedness and dependency upon each other? Because I think sometimes we lose that and we think that we can all do it alone, but we can't.
I think
the hardest question to answer.
Right.
No, I don't think it's hard. There's a couple ways. You do it by example, number one. Number two, you inspire others. When I can't recall who it was, it might have been Roy, but the idea is when you help someone, they learn to help someone else. So I think it's simple. I think you be a good example, and you do it as much and often as you can, and you focus on it. That's one way.
When I counsel people, homeless people, or people that are struggling and need help, I ask them, do you have family here? And can you go to them? And when they say no, I say, you need to join a church. And you listen to the people on this call, and the things that bind people together are families and church. And that is where the people surrounding someone know them well enough to know their needs and to know how they can be served. And that to me is the solution. You reconnect people to their family. You connect them with a group whose motivation, and this is best done, I think, in a religion, is their motivation is to help the members of that group, because that's where much of community service occurs, within the religious group or in the proximity of the religious group. That's where the solution lies. And as valuable as the services that the government provides, and they provide a great many of value, there are some things they cannot replicate. And families and bodies of faith that are bound together are two things they cannot replicate.
Well, I just want to be really careful here, because there's a lot of people out there that need help that may not be willing or at the point in their consciousness where they want to adopt that. I think it's important that we state, and I know all the Christian organizations I know, except for when I was a hippie in the 60s and the Salvation Army came out and I had to listen to the preaching for an hour before I got the fried chicken. You know, the simple reality is that's transactional, but we can't, just because someone isn't willing to walk our path or even find something that far beyond themselves at this point yet, I think it's important that we serve those two. I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but my experience is that these people are in isolation, and they may not want. I mean, if they want to be a Sikh and that will do for them what they need, that's wonderful. My point is, the ones I see need that connection. It's either a family or a group whose fundamental philosophy is to lift and aid and help others.
I don't know that I have an answer, Isabel, but what it brings to mind is the Episcopal Baptismal Covenant, which is to seek and serve Christ in all people and respect their dignity. And it's the dignity part that in my practice of chaplaincy, is this real commitment to allowing people to be exactly who they are. So part of the discipline for me as a chaplain is, can I be present to people, even if I watch them light their lives on fire? Can I be present and accompany them, even if they aren't interested in sobriety, aren't interested in any host of things that I might think would benefit them? Can I still remain present to them and love them and care for them? Which is hard. It's a real discipline. But I think that's a critical part of maintaining that web, that I don't push back and begin to judge a person because they won't sign on to my list of things, whatever they are. They don't have to be theological in nature. They can be ideological in nature. So when I listen to the larger political discourse, I think about that. Can I love people who don't sign on to what I feel like is important? And anyway, that's my call and my practice. I'm not great at it, by the way, but
humility and honesty is very important too. Roy, did you have anything to add to that about just, I don't know if we heard from you yet on how do we encourage that sense of.
Well, I've worked with a lot of veterans who have PTSD, and we take them to the talking circle and get them out there at dawn and gather them together, and we form a circle just before daylight. And then I have them all turn their backs to me and just face east, and they're all waiting, nervously waiting, not knowing what's on my mind, until that first light breaks. Then I tell them one by one to turn around and look what's behind the next man. And they turn around one by one, they look and they're staring and they don't see anything. And then I tell them, you know what you're looking at? You're looking at your shadow of the past. That was yesterday. You cannot go back there or live there. It's gone. Those things that you endured are over, and you're not that anymore. And until you can free them into thinking about accepting something greater than themselves, you can get them to go on in a spirit journey. I've seen it with my own eyes. Some will go home and think about it, not return. Others will return. And they begin to think more and more about where they are in the world. And they start to ponder the meaning of life, no matter what they went through, no matter what they did, no matter what they endured. We have to have faith. Without faith, you cannot walk in the light. And you need support systems, all types. And right now, more than ever. We really need faith-based organizations now to step up like never before. And all of you here have done it. I can see it. I can see it in your faces. So thank you.
I mean, that feels like a beautiful way to sort of, I don't want to end this conversation, because frankly, I think that I hope that everyone who's been here in attendance feels that this is the beginning of more conversations. It's definitely the beginning of our series of conversations here at the library. But so I don't want this to be the end. But I think it's the beginning. There is no shadow anymore. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and being honest and vulnerable and and speaking with us this evening. I want to allow any opportunity for any questions that anyone might have from any of our participants, if you'd like to share those somewhere in the chat or in the Q&A section. Also, we can just give a few minutes for people to collect their thoughts and come up with a question. You don't have to have one right this second. I'm going to think about if I have any follow-up questions, but I just wanted to allow that moment for anyone who might have something else to say.
I think that's a good question. That's the $1 million question. How do you get your children to under? Did you see the question? How do we inspire the young?
So the question for, if anyone can't see that from our participants, was how do we encourage young people to get involved in service? And I was a teen librarian for many years, so this is a question near and dear to my heart. Does anyone have anything they want to share about that?
Well, I mean, to me, by example is the only thing that works. The do as I say, not as I do. It just takes about 10 seconds for kids to see the hypocrisy of that, and they will shut down and not care for much of what you say that rest of that day. I mean, if you show them, I have this all the time from members of my community. And, if you're sick, you're not supposed to drink, you're not supposed to smoke, you're not supposed to run around, you're faithful in your relationships. And I have other Sikh parents come to me and say, how do we get the kids to follow this path? I said, well, what do you do? What's the first thing you do when you come home? Johnny Walker Red to relax from the day. And then you tell the kids not to drink? How's that going to work? So I think by showing by example, and as Roy said, this is how the elders showed the young in his community, by example, by giving, by bringing them places where they can experience and see giving and see why people do it, not just be told to do it.
I had a mother who occasionally would cook dinner. And then she'd say, come with me. We'd get in the car, we'd drive somewhere, and she'd leave it for a family. And at Christmas time, she would bake loaves of banana bread and cookies. The same thing. She didn't talk about service particularly. But, as a young person, I went along. I will confess, I really wanted to eat some of those cookies she was going to deliver. But I saw her doing it. If felt good to me. I didn't understand, but it gave me a warm feeling to be a part of that process. And she didn't talk about it much. She just said, we got to go visit so-and-so. She dropped food off. I think that probably had as powerful an influence on me as any number of sermons or other things that I heard along the way.
Mhm.
I also think that adolescents are sort of their lives are structured so they're not able to make contributions, right? I mean, I understand that churches structure in service projects, but by and large, adolescence in American culture is rendered this sort of extended playtime. And I think honestly that at least our three sons, the moments that they've had to really make a contribution in the places they could was significant for them. Oh, I can do this. Oh, it does matter. What I do does matter. And so I think finding ways that aren't simply trivial, that are regular and sustained for young people to make a difference in other people's lives that makes sense to them. So our three sons, we asked that they volunteer during high school and they got to choose where they did it. So one of my sons volunteers on an urban farm here near where we live. I would never in a million years want to do that. Like, it's hard physical labor what he does, but he chose it and it makes sense to him and he feels good about it. So I think providing students real live opportunities that are meaningful to them, so they learn to grow that muscle. Example matters for sure, without a doubt, but also teaching them in real ways that their lives do matter and their service does matter in the way they do it now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. For me, it's being non-judgmental, respecting them as children, showing respect, unconditional love. And above all, you have to encourage them. That's what I would say.
I think that's all really good advice. And I think too, I'll add that in my experience working, trying to get young people to do service projects as well at the library. Something that I've always found powerful too is again community, when they get to do it with their peers and people they like, and people like when they're in community with each other. I think that can be really powerful because it makes it more fun. And I think that serving, like I think as we talked about earlier at the beginning of the conversation, like serving others and doing service projects makes you feel good and like is enjoyable, and making things feel enjoyable and like fun, for lack of a better word. Not fun isn't trivial. Fun is just
right
enjoyable. Like it's fun. It's fun to do to help people and to work in a community and to be a part of something. That's a fun experience. I think that can be really powerful too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As a motivator.
I agree.
I have one last question, maybe. I'm going to spring this on you all, and I didn't ask any, so I don't know if you have anything. Because this is a library program, I do feel obligated to say, does anyone have any book recommendations, any literary recommendations, things that, it could be a scripture or otherwise, like anything that you have read in your life that has really informed your sense of service and care for community, or your sense of your own spirituality even. I don't know if anyone has anything.
Well, that's just a giant category.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought about asking you all this before this conversation, but I said, no, just bring it on them at the very end, see if they have anything off the top of their head.
Mm-hmm.
I have a book that I give anybody that goes through the training called This Is Water. It's a short let me Google it first. It's a short, it's a
Google it too.
No, I'll Google it. I have it right here. Wait, let me step away. Sorry. This is Water. It's by David Foster Wallace.
Oh, heard of him.
Yeah. He wrote Confederacy of Dunces, but it's his speech at a graduation, and it's a short book. I will forewarn you, there's like plenty of foul language in it, so trigger warning, but it is this great rendering of how the sacred shows up in ordinary moments, and it's our work to become available to it. So a traffic jam can become this cathedral in time. It's a beautiful commencement speech that he gives. So
I'll recommend a bunch of books. Go to the USC book fair every year, and I think it's in April. It's just an amazing place where even if you're not inspired to read, you're going to be inspired to read, and have to speak with the authors, and you see the thousands and thousands and thousands of books available.
Me, I think it's any kind of book that transports you into another culture. I think those books I found the most interesting. Adventurous books where there was a challenge, a struggle, heroism, where a person had to dig very, very deep and found and discovered their spiritual strength. Because you say you can't do anything without the Creator. And sometimes you just have to be put up against it to discover that. So books that I've always liked were those type.
Any last thoughts or words from anybody, from anyone in the comments, in the chat, anything that any of us would like to, anything you would like to share as a final word before we wrap up on this Wednesday evening?
Yeah, congratulate your bosses for allowing you to do this. It's important. Learning to understand and to get along and to work with each other may not be the same as going to a Beyonce concert, but it's more important.
It's true. Thank you all so much. Thank you for that, Nirinjan.
Yeah.
This has been a really exciting project that's been going on at LA County Library, is really figuring out how to bring the library into conversation with religion and faith, and seeing, and this feels like a really good way to kick that off, this event, and talking about why we live in community, why our communities matter, why our neighbors matter, why it is important to help people, to care about people, to be generous and compassionate and caring. Like, those are values that the library believes in. Those are values that we all, like, everyone here believes in. And I think it's a really important message. And I'm really glad that we got to spend this evening in like a really lovely space. I also took a lot of notes that are just for myself, just for me.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Yeah, hey, hey, yeah, yeah. 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 We are. Good night.
Thank you for that blessing.
Thank
you, Roy.